It started with a message. Just a simple one, the kind that shouldn't have meant anything. Come by the ranch sometime, we'll have a couple drinks. It was from Luke. I hadn't talked to Luke Riley in almost 4 years, at least not in any real way. We'd grown up in the same dusty Texas town, the kind where football is a religion, everybody knows your middle name, and gossip travels faster than bad news. He was a local legend. Varsity quarterback, raised working cattle, always had some pretty girl hanging off his arm. And me? I was the quiet one. Liked art, preferred books over bonfires. Kept to myself. I'd had a crush on him in high school. Nothing crazy, just the usual you have no chance feelings you bury deep enough to pretend they don't exist. I watched him from afar, convinced I could fool myself into thinking it was nothing. And it worked. Mostly. I moved to Austin after graduation. Built a life. Graphic design job, downtown apartment, overpriced cold brews, the whole deal. I didn't think I'd ever hear from Luke again. So when I saw his name pop up on my phone that Thursday afternoon, I stared at it for a full minute before I responded. Sure. What time? He replied almost instantly. 8. You still like bourbon? I told myself I was going out of curiosity, that it didn't mean anything, that I just wanted to catch up. But my hands were shaking a little as I pulled my truck up the long gravel drive of the Riley family ranch later that night. The porch light was on, casting a wide amber glow, and there he was, leaning against the rail in jeans and boots, holding a glass like he'd been waiting for me. Thought you'd chicken out, he said, grinning as I stepped out. I almost did, I admitted. Luke hadn't changed much. Maybe his jaw was a little sharper, his stubble more permanent, but he still had that same cocky posture, like the world owed him a good time. Except something about him tonight felt different, calmer, like the wild energy he always had was just quieter now. He handed me a glass without asking. Bourbon. Neat. Come on, he said, tipping his head toward the back porch. Let's sit. The night was warm, dry, stars scattered above us like salt on velvet. We sat side by side, nothing but a railing and a pasture between us and the dark horizon. We talked about nothing at first, weather, work, the old high school teachers. But after a while, Luke went quiet, just swirled his glass and stared out into the dark. I've been thinking about you, he said finally, voice low. I blinked. Me? He nodded once. Ever since I ran into you at the feed store last month, something about the way you looked at me made me realize I'd missed something. Missed what? He didn't answer right away. Just took another slow sip, then glanced sideways at me. Missed what we could have been, if I wasn't such a damn coward back then. My heart climbed right up into my throat. I'd waited years to hear something like that. And now that it was happening, I didn't know what to say. Luke, I started, but he held up a hand. I'm not expecting anything. Hell, I don't even know if this is anything. I just figured I owed you honesty, for once. The silence between us was thick, but not heavy. It buzzed with something electric, something alive. He looked at me again, his expression softer now. You ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different? I nodded. All the time. He smiled a little, that old Luke grin. But this time, it didn't feel cocky. It felt hopeful. Well, he said, raising his glass toward mine, maybe it's not too late to find out. We clinked glasses. The sound was soft, but it hit harder than I expected. Maybe it was the bourbon, or maybe it was the way he was looking at me now. Steady, no smirk, just there. Real. I took a slow sip and looked away, trying to find something safe to say. So what changed? He leaned back in his chair, boots resting on the railing. Time, I guess. Growing up, being alone out here most nights, you get to thinking. All those years I spent trying to be someone I wasn't, felt like I was always playing a role. That surprised me. Luke had always seemed so sure of himself, confident, almost annoyingly so. You fooled everyone, I said. He gave a quiet laugh, including myself. A warm breeze drifted across the porch. I stared out at the silhouette of the barn in the distance, the field stretching into darkness. I'd forgotten how quiet it got out here. No cars, no sirens, no neighbors yelling next door. Just bugs, wind, the occasional snort from a horse or moo from a cow. "You really live out here all by yourself?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "Dad passed 3 years ago. Mom moved in with her sister in Amarillo, so it's just me and the horses now." He said it like it was normal, but I could hear the weight in his voice, the loneliness. It lingered, like dust in the air you could feel but not see. "You ever think about leaving?" I asked. He shook his head. "This place is all I've ever known. Might be old and dusty and falling apart in places, but it's mine." I nodded, letting the quiet stretch again. Something about this felt surreal, like we were picking up a conversation that had been paused for a decade, except neither of us knew where we'd left off. Luke stood suddenly. "Come on," he said. "Let me show you something." I followed him down the steps and across the dirt toward the barn. He flipped on a light, and the space filled with a soft golden glow. The air was warm and smelled like hay and old wood. Saddles hung on hooks, bridles lined the wall, and a black and white cat watched us lazily from a stack of feed bags. "You still ride?" I asked. "Every day," he said, running his hand over a saddle. "You want to go sometime?" I shrugged. "I haven't been on a horse since high school." He grinned. "Bet you haven't forgotten. Muscle memory." I leaned against one of the wooden beams. "What are we doing out here, Luke?" He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Trying to figure out if this is something." There was something about the way he said it. No pressure, no assumptions, just a truth laid bare. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" I asked. "Because this isn't something you just test drive." He nodded, slowly. "I know. But I'm tired of pretending. I've spent too many nights staring at the ceiling wondering what it'd be like if I just stopped running." He stepped closer then. Not a big move, just a small shift. But it felt massive. His boots scuffed against the barn floor, and he stood there in front of me, arms crossed, close enough that I could smell the bourbon on his breath, and the faint scent of leather and earth on his skin. "You were always the one person I couldn't shake," he said quietly. "I'd see your name pop up on Facebook, see you out with friends, living your life, and I'd wonder what it'd be like if I'd just said something sooner." I didn't know what to say to that. I just looked at him, my chest tight. "Say something," he whispered. I didn't. I just reached for him. My hand found his shirt, soft, worn cotton, and I pulled him in. He didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. He just kissed me. Not hard, not desperate, but like it had been waiting years to happen. The kiss was quiet. That's the only way I can describe it. No music swelling in the background, no dramatic build-up, just the sound of old wood creaking under our boots and the slow, careful meeting of lips that had spent too long apart. Luke's hand hovered near my waist, not quite touching, like he was afraid to move too fast. I could feel the tension in him, his chest rising a little quicker, his breath just barely shaky. And me, I was frozen in the best way, not scared, just overwhelmed. When we finally pulled back, we didn't speak right away. We just stood there in the barn light, looking at each other. "Okay," Luke said softly, like he was trying to convince himself. "Okay," I let out a nervous breath. "That was—" "Yeah," he said. "It was." He ran a hand through his hair, stepping back a little, suddenly unsure. The confident cowboy who'd greeted me on the porch was gone, replaced with someone I hadn't met before. Someone a little uncertain, a little vulnerable. "Was that a mistake?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not even close." His shoulders relaxed just slightly, and a flicker of that crooked smile returned. "Good. 'Cause I've been thinking about that since we were 17. That got a laugh out of me. "You waited over a decade for a 5-second kiss?" "Well," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "I didn't plan it that way. Just didn't think I was allowed to want it." We walked out of the barn together, neither of us saying much. The air had cooled, but the buzz from that moment still clung to my skin. When we got back to the porch, he gestured toward the couch just inside the house. "You staying the night?" he asked, voice casual, but there was something behind it. Hope maybe, or fear. I hesitated for just a second. "Yeah," I said, "if that's all right." He nodded. It's more than all right. Inside, the house was quiet, dimly lit. A single lamp in the living room cast long shadows, and the air smelled like cedar and something faintly smoky, probably from the old wood-burning stove. Luke grabbed a spare blanket from the closet and tossed it on the couch, but I could see it in his face. He didn't really want me sleeping there. I didn't want to, either. I mean, he started, hesitating, you don't have to crash on the couch unless you want to. Bed's big enough. That should have made things awkward. Should have made the tension unbearable. But it didn't. Okay, I said simply. We got ready in silence. I borrowed a t-shirt and some basketball shorts from him, both too big but soft and warm. When I stepped into his room, he was already in bed, shirtless, his arm behind his head, the sheets pooled around his waist. Hope you don't snore, he said. I climbed in beside him, the mattress dipping under my weight. The bed was warm from his body, and I tried to keep a few inches of space between us, but it didn't last. Do you ever think about what people would say? He asked suddenly. I turned my head toward him. You mean if they knew? Yeah, I shrugged. I used to. A lot. But after a while, I figured, let them talk. They're gonna anyway. He was quiet for a moment, then said, You always were braver than me. I was terrified, I admitted. Still am sometimes. He turned onto his side, propped up on one elbow. So how'd you do it? I looked at him, the way the shadows moved across his face, softening him. I just got tired of pretending I wasn't who I am. Luke didn't say anything. Instead, he reached out and brushed his fingers along my jaw. It was a light touch, barely there, but it made my pulse spike. Can I? He started, then cut himself off. You already did, I whispered. He leaned in again, slower this time. And when our lips met again, it wasn't quiet. It was full. Real. Like the beginning of something. And in that moment, lying in that creaky old bed on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, I didn't care who knew. I didn't care about the past or the years we lost. I just cared that Luke Riley had finally kissed me like he meant it. The next morning, I woke to the scent of coffee and something frying. Bacon, maybe eggs. The sun was already creeping through the curtains, casting streaks of light across the bed. For a second, I didn't remember where I was. Then I felt the warmth behind me. Luke's arm loose around my waist. His breath slow and steady against the back of my neck. He was still asleep. I stayed there a while, eyes half closed, just taking it in. The steady rise and fall of his chest against my back. The way his hand twitched slightly when he exhaled, like his body was still catching up to the fact that this was real. It didn't feel like a dream. But it didn't feel entirely real yet, either. Eventually, I eased out of bed, careful not to wake him, and padded into the kitchen. Sure enough, bacon sizzled in a pan, and coffee brewed in an ancient-looking machine that made a loud sputtering noise every few seconds. I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter, staring out the window. The ranch looked different in the daylight, open, endless, golden. The fields stretched out like they had nowhere to be, and the barn stood quietly in the distance, like it was keeping a secret. I sipped the coffee, trying to ignore the small knot of nervous energy building in my stomach. I'd been here less than 12 hours, and everything had changed. Again. Luke walked in about 15 minutes later, barefoot, shirtless, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Mornin', he mumbled. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. He looked at me for a long second before walking over and pressing a soft kiss to my cheek. Last night wasn't a fluke, he said quietly, just so we're clear. I know, I said. But thanks for saying it. He smiled, then walked over to flip the bacon. You hungry? Starving. We ate in the small dining nook by the window, the morning sun pouring in. The conversation stayed light. He asked about work, I asked about the horses, but every now and then our eyes would meet, and something unspoken passed between us. Not tension, exactly. More like electricity that hadn't found a place to land yet. After breakfast, we went out to the barn. Luke saddled up 2 horses and asked if I wanted to go riding. I hesitated. It had been years, but the look on his face, hopeful, patient, made it easy to say yes. We rode in silence for a while, the hooves crunching along the dirt path. The land was beautiful, rolling hills and fences that stretched for miles. The wind smelled like hay and dry grass and something else, something unmistakably him. At one point, we stopped under a tree, letting the horses rest. Luke looked over at me, one hand on the reins, the other resting on his thigh. "I don't want this to be a one-time thing," he said. I looked at him. "Then it won't be." "I'm serious." "So am I." He nodded, his jaw working like he was holding something back. "What?" I asked. He sighed. "I just don't know how this works. I've never done this before. Not with a guy. Not with anyone I actually give a damn about." My heart twisted a little. "We don't have to figure it all out today." "I know. He stopped, looked away for a second. "I'm not used to wanting something this much." I reached over, touching his hand lightly. "Good. That makes 2 of us." We rode back in silence again, but it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, like we'd stepped into a new version of whatever this had always been, and neither of us was ready to leave it. That night, after dinner, we sat on the porch again, same spot as before, same drinks in hand. The stars were out, the sky a full stretch of velvet and silver. Luke cleared his throat. "What do we tell people?" I raised an eyebrow. "Who do you want to tell?" He shrugged. "People around town, the guys at the feed store, my mom, I guess." "You don't owe anyone anything," I said. "But if you're asking me whether I want to hide this, I don't." His eyes met mine. "Good, because I don't either." He took my hand right there, on that porch, no hesitation. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The thing about a small Texas town is, nothing stays quiet for long. We hadn't said anything. Not really. But somehow, by the time I stopped at the gas station in town 2 days later to grab some snacks, there were already eyes on me. Not the usual kind either. The kind that lingered too long. That said, we know something you think we don't. I didn't tell Luke about it right away. He had enough on his plate running the ranch solo. But I could feel it building, like a storm way off in the distance. You couldn't see it yet, but you could smell it coming. Still, those days after I stayed over, they were some of the best I'd had in a long time. We fell into a rhythm. Wake up, coffee, chores around the ranch, late lunch on the porch, maybe a ride in the evening. He'd let me tag along when he fixed the fencing, show me how to work the gate without catching your thumb like a rookie, and at night we'd sit close. Shoulders brushing, hands occasionally finding each other under the table, just little things. But they meant everything. One night after dinner, I found Luke in the barn, brushing one of the horses. The sky had already gone dark, and the only light came from a single bulb swinging overhead. He was humming to himself, something low and familiar, maybe an old country tune. I stood in the doorway, watching him for a minute. "You always sing to them?" He looked up, grinning. "Only when I'm in a good mood." "So, always?" He laughed and set the brush down. "You're full of it." I walked up to him, slow, hands in my pockets. "You thinking about the future at all?" I asked. "Like us?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I've never really done that, with anyone. But yeah, I guess I have been." "Me too." He looked at me for a long second. "Scares the hell out of me." "Same." There was a beat of silence. Then he asked, "You staying longer?" I was hoping to. He didn't say anything, just stepped forward and pulled me into him, slow and sure. His forehead rested against mine, and he whispered, "Good." But it wasn't all easy. 2 days later, his friend Dean stopped by. Big guy, wore boots like he was born in them, and chewed on sunflower seeds constantly. They chatted outside for a while, and I watched from the kitchen window. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could see it in Dean's body language. The sudden stiffness, the way he glanced toward the house, the forced handshake before he left without even coming inside. Luke came in a few minutes later, wiping his hands on a rag, jaw tight. "What was that about?" I asked. He hesitated. "Nothing. Just catching up." "Luke," he let out a long breath. He asked if it was true, about us. My stomach dropped. "What did you say?" "I didn't lie." I nodded slowly, trying to hide the lump forming in my throat. "Okay, good." He tossed the rag on the counter, pacing a little. It's different here. People don't always understand." "I know." "I'm not ashamed," he said quickly, like he needed to get it out before I misunderstood. "I'm not. But I didn't think it would start this fast." Neither did I. Later that night, I found him outside, sitting on the tailgate of his truck, staring up at the sky. I slid in next to him, the metal cool beneath us. "You regret it?" I asked, not looking at him. He shook his head. "Not for a second." "Even if it changes things?" He looked over, eyes steady. "Especially then." He took my hand right there under the stars, no hesitation, no fear. And in that quiet, I realized something. We weren't just figuring out what we were choosing it. Together. The next week passed in a kind of warm blur. Morning started earlier now. Luke had more help than he used to, but the ranch didn't run itself, and he liked doing things the old way. I'd wake up to the smell of coffee already brewing, the sound of boots across the hardwood, and sometimes, if I was lucky, the weight of his body pressing briefly into mine before he slipped out of bed. We didn't make a big thing of it. There were no labels, no long talks about what this was or where it was going. But everything about the way he moved, how he made space for me in his routine, how he leaned just a little closer when we stood next to each other, said more than words could. Still, I could tell something was shifting. People were noticing. One morning, we drove into town together to grab some feed and pick up a few things from the hardware store. It should have been a regular errand, but the second we stepped into the general store, I felt it, that weight of being watched. The old guy behind the counter, Mr. Jenkins, didn't say much, just nodded politely like always. But two women near the cold drink section looked up, whispered something to each other, and quickly looked away. Luke caught it too. I saw his jaw flex just a little. "Small town," he muttered as we loaded the bags of feed into the truck bed. "Yeah," I said, "but it's not like we're doing anything wrong." "We're not," he said. But his tone had changed. Just a shade tighter, just a little guarded. That night, he was quiet over dinner, kept his eyes on his plate, didn't say much. I didn't push. I knew better than to poke at something before he was ready to talk. But later, when we were stretched out on the couch, TV playing some old Western neither of us were really watching, he finally spoke up. "I keep thinking about my dad," he said. I looked over. "Yeah?" He never would have understood this. "Us." I waited, not sure what to say yet. He was the kind of guy who believed a man should be a man. Shake hands hard. Work with your hands. Keep your head down and your mouth shut. He didn't talk about feelings. He didn't have time for. Different. I stayed quiet, letting him work through it. "I used to think he was right," Luke went on. "And I spent so damn long trying to be the version of myself he'd approve of. The cowboy. The straight shooter. The ladies' man. All of it." He looked over at me then, eyes soft. "But you being here, it's the first time I've felt like I'm not pretending anymore." I swallowed hard. "You're not." He nodded, almost to himself. "I'm just scared I'm gonna lose everything because of it." "You won't," I said. "Not everything." Luke leaned back, one arm resting behind me. "You're not worried?" "Course I am," I admitted. "But I've done this already. Came out, dealt with the fallout, rebuilt. It was hard, yeah, but I survived." He looked at me for a long moment, like he was trying to memorize every line on my face. "You're brave," I snorted. "I'm barely keeping it together. Still brave." he said, and leaned in to kiss me. It wasn't rushed or heated, just grounding. Like a reminder that even when things felt uncertain, this us wasn't. Afterward, we sat on the porch again, stars overhead, wind rustling through the dry grass. It felt like something out of a country song. He reached for my hand without looking. I let him. "You're the first person I've ever done this with," he said quietly. Held hands, slept beside, woke up wanting to talk to. I didn't respond right away. I just held his hand tighter and leaned into him, shoulder to shoulder. Because that's what it was now. No more wondering. No more guessing. Just the start of something we both knew we didn't want to lose. I knew something was wrong the moment Luke walked in from the pasture that afternoon. His shirt was damp with sweat, hat pushed back on his head, and his usual slow, confident stride had been replaced by something stiffer, more distracted. He barely looked at me when he passed through the kitchen, just muttered a tired "hey" and went straight to the sink to splash cold water on his face. "You good?" I asked, leaning against the counter. He didn't answer right away. Then, Dean came by again. I stiffened. "What did he say?" Luke grabbed a towel, drying his face, still not looking at me. "Word spreading," he said. "A couple guys from the co-op are talking." Said I should be careful. That people are noticing things. I hated the way he said it. Like we were something shameful, like noticing was a problem. "Did you tell him to mind his damn business?" "I didn't say anything," Luke said. "I just nodded and let him talk." "Why?" "Because if I opened my mouth, I might have said something I'd regret." He turned around then, finally facing me. His eyes were tired, not just from the heat or the work, but from something deeper. Fear. Conflict. "You're mad," he said. "I'm not," I replied. I've been here before, Luke. The stares, the whispers, the double meanings. It doesn't scare me anymore, but I get it if it still scares you." He didn't respond. "I'm not asking you to put on a pride flag and shout it from the barn roof," I said. "But I also can't go backward. I won't." Luke looked at me then, really looked at me. "I don't want to go backward either." "Then what are we doing?" "I'm trying," he said, voice low. "I just don't want to lose everything I've built here." "And what about what we're building?" I asked. That landed. I saw it in his face. He crossed the kitchen and stopped in front of me. Close, but not touching. "I want this," he said. "More than I've wanted anything in a long time." "Then act like it," I said, softer now. He reached out, finally, hands settling on my hips. "I'm scared." "I am too," I whispered, "but we can be scared together." That night, he did something I hadn't expected. He invited me into town with him. It wasn't a big deal on the surface, just a couple drinks at the local bar. But in a town like this, it was everything. Public, visible, real. When we walked in side by side, people noticed. Heads turned. Conversation slowed just enough to feel it. And then it kept going. No one said anything. Not yet. But Luke's hand found the small of my back when we ordered drinks, and he didn't flinch when one of his buddies nodded and gave him a look. Back at the table, I leaned close. "You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah. Actually, yeah." Halfway through our second round, one of the guys from the ranch, a younger guy named Travis, walked over and pulled up a chair. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, "You two good?" Luke raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." Travis nodded. "Cool. I figured." I braced for a punchline. For a joke, but it never came. Travis just sipped his beer, gave a little shrug. "Ain't my business, long as you're happy." And just like that, the air in the bar felt a little lighter. Later, on the drive back, Luke was quiet. Not the heavy kind, just thoughtful. "I think it's gonna be okay," he said eventually. "I think so too." He glanced over at me, hand resting on the gear shift, the edge of a smile tugging at his lips. "You still glad you came over for drinks that night?" I laughed. "More than glad." The next morning was different. Not in a huge way. Luke still got up early to feed the horses. I still made the coffee. But something had shifted. Something quiet, but solid. Like a knot that had finally come undone. When he came back in from the barn, dirt on his boots and hay stuck to his sleeve, he walked right up to me and kissed me. No hesitation, no checking if someone might see, just kissed me. And then he sat down at the table and poured himself a cup of coffee like it was the most normal thing in the world. Because maybe now it was. After breakfast, we took the truck out past the north fence. One of the gates had been sticking, and Luke wanted to fix it before the fall rains came. I rode shotgun, the windows down, the air warm and dry. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. When we got there, he hopped out, grabbed the toolbox, and I followed. It was just us, open land, and the sound of a metal gate groaning against old hinges. As we worked, he paused, leaning against the post, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his arm. "You know," he said, "if you wanted to stay a while longer, that'd be okay." I straightened up, blinking. "What do you mean?" "I mean, stay. A few more weeks. Or months. Or just stay." I searched his face, trying to figure out if he was joking. He wasn't. "You serious?" He nodded. "Yeah. I know your life's in Austin. Your work. Your people. I'd never ask you to give it up. But if you wanted, we could figure something out. Split time. Hell, work remote. Whatever makes sense." "You sure?" He nodded again. "I'm sure about you." My chest felt tight in the best possible way. I'd spent most of my life thinking guys like him didn't end up with guys like me. Not because of looks or personalities or whatever, but because of how the world worked. Or didn't. But here he was, offering me something I hadn't realized I'd stopped believing in. A place, a home, a future. "I'll stay," I said, "for now. And we'll figure it out from there." Luke grinned, that old familiar crooked grin, and stepped forward, pulling me into a hug that was part relief, part promise. Later that night, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills, he reached for my hand. "This still feels a little unreal," he said. "It is real." "I know," he said quietly. "I just never thought this could be mine." "You didn't think I could be yours?" I teased. He smirked. "I figured you were too smart to fall for a dusty cowboy with no clue how to date." "Well," I said, leaning into him, "I've always had a soft spot for lost causes." He kissed the side of my head. "Then you're stuck with me." "I think I can live with that." The sky turned deep orange, then blue, then dark. The stars came out like they always did, and we stayed there long after the bugs had quieted and the breeze had cooled. And in that quiet, I realized something. This wasn't just a summer thing, or a rebound, or a memory waiting to fade. This was the real thing, and it started with a simple invitation. Come over for drinks.